call this meeting to order. Please stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Could we have a roll call of members?
Dr. Malloy,
Here.
Mr. Mignon,
Here.
Mr. Hoff, Mr. Greenwood, Mrs. Irwin Adams, Mr. Johnston, Mr. Francis, Mrs. McGinnis, Mr. Cook.
Here.
At this time, we'll have hearing from citizens. Anybody wish to address the board?
Kelly Bowers, Altoona. Okay, so I want to address something, and I don't care how anyone feels about it. The junior varsity basketball team at the junior high. Okay. I put stuff out on my page because I knew there was more to it. And if no one else wants to address it, I was. But here's the problem, because y'all addressed it how you did. Little kids think it's okay to call and harass me on my phone number. Now, I did bring that to myself, but because I put this on my page. But the problem is the rape culture in this district. And now here's the thing. I'm starting tonight talking about this, and I'm just going to keep going with every last thing I know about the rape culture that's happened in this district for the past 13 years until people start listening and it starting to change, because these kids deserve so much better from this district. Whenever I went to school here, these walls in all of our schools were wherever kid came to feel safe. And they should not have to endure comments about if they're easy to rape, hard to rape, or not, whether it's someone saying it or not. And you know what these kids have to say? And it was a teacher's kid that started calling me in the first place. Okay, so that goes to show something too. Okay, you guys are not dealing with these situations correct. I should not have to be dealing with harassing phone calls for an entire weekend just a couple weeks ago because of it. And I publicly addressed it again, saying about it. And I had another kid reach out because Yin's guys didn't deal with it appropriately, because I guess what Yin's did for disciplinary wasn't enough, because they still think this is a joke. And I'm sorry, as a rape survivor, rape, not grape, rape survivor, whenever I hear this stuff coming from things from our kids in our district, it hits different whenever it happens to you or someone you love. It's not just words. And these parents and a lot of people I'm talking to in this district, the nonchalant attitude about how these things are handled is sickening. And I'm done. And I'm sorry. I don't care if I'm the only person in this room or in this entire district that feels this way. I'm calling as it is. And this is bullshit.
Okay. Anybody else wish to address us? Hearing none. We have one item on the agenda. That's a change order for Washington and Jefferson Roof Project. Is there a motion regarding this? Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
If I can, Doug, correct me if I don't get this right. When we spec'd out and bid the roof, obviously we want to go with the most cost-effective way to do that. But prior to putting the new roof on, they had to do a pull test on the existing roof, because how the existing roof was adhering to the insulation underneath and how the insulation was adhering to the decking. I mean, the problem was when they tried to sink anchors into the deck, it would pull apart. The deck is a variation of OSB. It's some kind of strand board. Am I correct with that?
No, it's actually just more like
So it's a gypsum product. The problem was the anchors would not adhere, would not stay held in the gypsum product. So therefore, they couldn't put the roof on the way they intended. So they had to put new insulation on the roof and glue it in a specific way to ensure it was going to adhere, and we were going to have our warranty. So that's the reason for the change in the change order of approximately $200,000. Did I get it right, Doug?
Any
So if
questions?
you would put, which we don't want to do it, if you would put a rubber roof over what's currently on there, there goes your warranty, I assume.
It'll pull off.
And it is bubbling. It is cracking. And the way that underlayment's on there, it's like a puzzle. It's lifting up.
And
It's-
that wasn't noticed before, you didn't know about it before, you had to come with a change order?
We did not, the only other way would have been to do the testing prior. And quite simply, when you're trying to do a bid and you're trying to do a spec, you're trying to do it as inexpensively as possible. So we spec the most inexpensive way to replace the roof. But when you did the stress tests on the roof to make sure that it would work, the contractor did that, then we find out don't
I think that should have been done before, this should have been taken, been done before, and we wouldn't have to have this meeting if they had done it correctly. And they have to have seen it. They had to have seen it. They went up on the roof and looked and lifted the roof up, and then they had to see it was on the base of it. So you think common sense would tell you we should have just done it then.
Doug? You think past my roof expertise, Dave?
It doesn't make sense that you go up on a roof and you lift the roof and you look underneath and it's disintegrated. So why wasn't that noticed before with the experts when they went up on the roof?
We walked the roof several times, as we have on all of our roofs. There are other roofs like the B building where literally whole sheets, 8 by 10 sheets of insulation had lifted up and actually shifted over so they didn't go back into their puzzle piece hole. There on other roofs, there were soft spots in the roof. There were places that were squishy that you knew that the insulation had gotten water and would need to be removed. But we saw none of that on this roof. We walked the entire roof with the exception of, I think there was something like over 40 patches on the roof and some cracks that were starting to develop at the seams of the insulation board behind it. There was nothing to tell us that this roof was any different than the Ebner's or anything else where we removed the
So
membrane.
there's no test that they could do that just like you do a boring test and soil. There's nothing they could do on the roof to test it to see how the underlayment was.
We had to do this same test on the A building, and that's the only other roof that we've ever done this test on. The Ebner's, the McAuliffe Heights, the Penn Lincoln, we've not done that test.
Well, that's
Oh,
fine.
really?
We're gonna have to pay for it. If they'd have done it correctly, we'd have known that. We wouldn't have this meeting right now. But, it wasn't done correctly and we're, it has to be done. So there's nothing we can do. What's done is done. So it doesn't matter. So it's done with.
Has there been any interior damage as a result of this? Leakage and
A ceiling tile, it's just a matter of the time that's been in place, that it's just gradually deteriorating and accelerating. No major damage.
okay, is there anything we learned from this that would help this from not occurring at another building? Any kind of testing or any kind of inspections that need to be done so that we don't end up with things rotting underneath the roof material?
Well, I don't think that there's anything rotting underneath the roof material. It's just that this gypsum is soft, and when they're screwing these large screws down into that, it's actually pulling right out. So it pulls out just like a screw out of drywall, exactly the same. What do we learn? We could add this to all of our scopes as a defensive measure. That we have the design professional do that before he writes the spec. We can do that. I hope.
Years ago, I know, back when I was here many years ago, there were yearly roof inspections and they would use an infrared device to see if there were any hot spots that might be leaking water, and things such as that. Is that being done or was it found not to be useful?
Now, my predecessor would have the inspectors come in. There was a fee for that. I don't remember what that fee was. We haven't done any infrared on those roofs. I'm going to say 4 or 5 years ago, one of the board members suggested, hey, why don't we have roof experts come in and inspect our roofs? And should we start thinking about replacing these roofs on a schedule regardless of when their warranty is out? Because that's what we were going by. This one's been out of warranty for 10 years first in a proactive attempt. Well, weather has always overtaken our proactive attempts. And when this roofing company came in and looked at all our roofs, they said, we wouldn't replace any of these in advance of failure because they're all in really good shape regardless of their age. And every roof that we've replaced has been, with the exception of this one, and Ebner was because we were getting cracks in the membrane, but every other one was a blow off. Where, it just the wind going over across the roof lifts the membrane and rips it off of the insulation.
Mhm.
So, and most of those were insurance claims when that occurred.
Now, I was up on the roof. It was about 2 weeks ago when I heard about this. I went up with Trevor and another custodian, and there's bubbles up there as big as this table, yay high. How long they've been like that, I don't know, but there's definitely bubbles up there from the insulation being lifted up from moisture or heat, and there's probably a good 30 patches up there.
Wow.
And the patches are probably 6 by 8 inches, all through the roof.
Sounds like something we need to get done.
Yes.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay,
But I
those,
like the idea of the, periodic roof inspections throughout this yearly.
perhaps that's
wouldn't be a
something
bad
that can
idea.
be discussed and reviewed. Okay, any other discussion? Okay, those in favor respond by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Opposed? Okay, those are the only items we have on the
Thank you.
agenda. Motion for adjournment. Motion for adjournment. Second. Okay, those in favor? Aye. Okay, we are adjourned. Start the next one. Okay. All right, we have this evening scheduled as a committee of the whole meeting. So we'll call that meeting to order. Okay, I guess we go through the stand for the moment of silence, followed by the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
United States of America,
States,
which stands under God, indivisible, liberty, justice for all.
we have a roll call of members
Dr. Malloy,
here.
Mr. Mignon,
Here.
Mr. Hoff, Mr. Greenwood, Mrs. Irwin Adams, Mr. Johnston, Mr. Francis, Mrs. McGinnis, Mr. Cook.
Here.
Okay. At this point, we're going to take a recess to have an executive session. So we'll convene immediately following the executive session.
Hello? Yep.
Thank you, Dr. Malloy. Well, we've had months and months of finance committee of the whole meetings, and this is the culmination of them all. There's a PowerPoint packet in front of you and also an updated budget book. And then two of the slides are very difficult to see. There's a lot of information on them. So there's a separate handout, potential cost reductions for discussion, and then a 15-year historical retirement rate increase effect compared to state subsidy and millage rates. Both of those are in your packet as well. So on the 19th, we will have the vote for the final budget vote. And tonight's presentation is going to be a review of a lot of the information we've covered over the past several months, a review of our statewide expenditure comparisons. We will review the local real estate tax assessed values and homestead farmstead assistance, the Act 1 cost of the taxpayer. We'll have the update for the general fund review and revenue and expense review. We will revisit some of our top cost drivers that make up 86% of our budget. We'll look at capital reserve projects and our 5-year projected plan, the tentative projected operational deficit, budget cuts discussion toward the end, and then review the 15-year historical retirement rate increases compared with the state subsidy and AASD fund balance, and then a quick wrap up. So we'll, without further ado, move on through it. In previous presentations, as you recall, we looked at student activities that make up 1.53% of our total expenditures. That was in September. Then we looked at maintenance, custodial, and building expenditures, which make up 9.8% of our total expenditures. That was October's meeting. In January, we looked at transportation and contractual obligations that include salary and benefits and retirement and cyber and special education, which make up 81% of our total expenditures. And from those 3 months alone, we were reviewing 92.33% of our budget. So then just a quick recap: student activities in September, the maintenance, custodial, and building in October, transportation and contractual obligations in January. We asked for direction regarding areas for reductions in February. We looked at administrator costs and statewide comparisons in March, and then the security expenditures and comparisons in April, as we've talked about enhancing our security across the district. Just a review of some of our key statistics compared to other districts. We are in the top 6% statewide in enrollment compared with other districts. And with special ed enrollment, we're in the top 20%. But our costs are in the lowest 5 to 10%. Our per pupil cost is in the lowest 5%. Our special ed per pupil cost is in the lowest 10%. Even our employee cost is in the lowest 10%, and our salary expense per pupil is in the lowest 25% compared to other districts statewide. And that just seems to point to the fact that we are doing the most with our money. Being a large district, we're still keeping our expenses down. This next slide is just the review of our district compared with other districts of similar expenditures. And as you can see, we're 475, we're way at the bottom. But some of the two of the other ones that are somewhat similar and our per pupil cost are smaller districts and wealthier districts. So Sue's going to review some of our real estate issues.
We have been talking for a couple of years as well about the state of the assessed value within the Alton Area School District, some of the problems that we are struggling with. And even though historically within the last couple of years, we have raised taxes a time or two, unfortunately, we've struggled with retaining that tax base to be able to carry the the tax increase forward. So you'll see, looking in 2019 through 2020, the assessed value in the Altoona Area School District was about $3.282 billion. The assessed value numbers as of February of 22, the February of 2023, they just came out, we're only at 3.232 billion. So we've lost about $50 billion over that time period, and we have not been able to regain it. The majority of that erosion has been in the commercial sector. If you look at the residential line, we are seeing consistent growth in residential, which means there is growth within the Altoona Area School District, was a very positive sign. Unfortunately, it appears as if we're losing commercial properties in industry. But as Dr. Priyatal has pointed out a number of times, there's a lot of people that still have strong belief in our area and our building and revitalizing the areas. So that's a good sign for us. The homestead exclusion was one of the things that we were able to benefit from last year. If you remember, the state gave us a dramatic increase in our homestead allowance. It went from $1.8 million to just about $2.5 million. So many of our taxpayers last year, even though we did pass a tax increase, were able to recognize a decrease in their taxes. So in 22-23, 198 taxpayers did not see any tax at all. Their properties were fully excluded from taxes. Then we had another 8,356 taxpayers that actually had a decrease in their taxes last year because of the homestead elections that they had taken. Unfortunately, we don't see that same effect this year. We have about 12,499 homeowners that have applied and have been granted homestead exclusion. Of those, 183, their properties are fully covered, so they will see no taxes at all because it's fully covered by the homestead exclusion, which we anticipate to be somewhere around $186 this year. The remaining homeowners, the average, and those properties range from 133,000 to 1.3 million. We'll see about $74 worth of tax increase if the board agrees to the proposed increase that's in the budget. The Act 1 index, as you know, we've talked about before, as well as the state mandated limit that the school district, without going to referendum exception, is not allowed to increase taxes below the Act 1 or above the Act 1 index. So the budget that we are proposing this evening contains a tax increase fully to the Act 1 index. That would take it from our current millage rate of 6.4349 mils to 6.814 mils, which would give the district, after our collection allowance, about $1.1 million in additional tax revenue. Over the life of this presentation, we've picked a 5-year period. The average property value, if you can see in the second line down, the average property value has increased year over year, according to the records that are published by the Blair County Courthouse. In 2019-20, our tax millage was at 2.053 mils on an average property of $118,502. And after the homestead reduction, property owners saw taxes, an annual tax bill of $594.75. This year, we are proposing that the taxes go to a millage rate of 6.814 on an average property value of $121,538, which would, after the homestead exclusion, net to the property owners an annual tax bill of $642.04. So over that 5-year period, that would be a net change of $47.29.
So in the, just a summary of our revenues, this 33 million of local revenue does include going to the index for local real estate taxes, and the state revenue does include what the governor has proposed for as a basic ed subsidy increase. The budget is not, the talks are moving, but we're a long way from having a budget. So we don't know where it's ultimately going to land from a state standpoint. Total proposed revenue is 127,382,000. Our summary of expenditures, these are very similar to what you saw in the May meeting. I did a couple of tweaks, and we're projecting that the revenue and expenditures will match. Summary of expenditures by objects. Again, these are very similar to what you saw at the May meeting, with salaries and benefits comprising the majority of the expenditures. The 600 objects with supplies actually did go down in several departments. And we cut budgets, and we'll show that on another slide, cut the supply budgets at the high school and the junior high and in some of the departments. The other objects, it does include a $2 million budgetary reserve in the event that our hospitalization, since we are self-funded, and we are proposing to add potentially 50 or more employees onto our healthcare, and we don't know what the actual expenditures will be. We have that reserve to help cover us if we have large claims. This is the revenue and expenditures and the change to fund balance over the last 4 or 5 years, and we're proposing that we will not be using any fund balance for next year's budget. And just a recap of our top cost drivers, which make up 86% of the budget, with salaries at 44%, retirement at 15%, hospitalization is 8%, special ed costs 16%, and cyber charter tuition that's mandated is 3% of the budget. And all of those 5 top cost drivers make up 86% of our budget. Here's just a line graph to show the historical climb, and these were negotiated salary increases. And plus in 23-24, this does include adding 9 security greeters, new positions, the additional psychologist, the additional special ed emotional support and autistic support, as well as ESP positions that haven't been filled, but some of them haven't been filled, but we're still budgeting for those. The retirement, this next slide, you've seen this before, but it just shows the disparity between what our retirement expenses are and what we were reimbursed. The employer contribution rates, this was a slide from Dr. P's State of the District. It's very telling. You can see how quickly it all climbed. And I have a slide at the very end that shows how it compares with what the state was providing us in subsidy compared to these large retirement increases. Hospitalization, it's high, but it's not out of control. We had hoped with reference-based pricing that we could have cut $1.5 million. That did not work out with UPMC. And so Dr. P has been working furiously to get us into the programs we have with the community partners and with Empower, and expanding our networks to keep our costs down. And I am budgeting that they will come down for next year, but setting aside $2 million in reserve in case it doesn't happen. Our special ed expenditures over revenues. Special ed has continued to climb, and the state and federal government don't fund us enough to cover what the costs are.
Camilla, can I ask a quick, have we, I think I talked to you about it earlier. Have we looked at the average age of a school district employee? Has it, I would expect it to be dropping, which trends well for your hospitalization costs.
That's true. And you did ask and I forgot to get
Oh,
it.
that's all right. Okay.
But I will have that for you tomorrow.
It's just a nice indicator to keep track of. Because it should reflect if
that is reflected in the nutritional savings. Right, it's going to have an impact on one of the
That's true. But the flip side to that is school code requires that we offer coverage, healthcare coverage until 65. And while it's true, we have a lot of people retiring this year. And in my mind, they were relatively young. There were a lot of people in their 50s that retired this year. And based on the number of calls, Anne-Marie was out today and her phone was forwarded to me. And based on the number of calls she was getting from retirees, they're going to want to stay on our health care. And so our retiree costs are still high, even though we have a younger population. We still have many of the retired teachers on our coverage. And some of them are choosing, they pay for it, they pay a premium, but that's
right.
correct. It is covering a fraction of the actual costs. And many of them, if they are leaving the area, are going with the highest cost plan. The difference in special ed, we talked about that. Cyber charter tuition costs, it actually is, it's down from where it was. And kudos to our own internal cyber. We have, I believe Mr. Hatch reported that we have over 500 students in our own internal cyber. We are making every effort to bring those students back to Altoona when we can. And we can be hopeful that there will be some cyber legislation that.
If I can add, if you look at 18-19, we were 3.4 million. 19-20, we were 3.1. COVID was 4 million. We came down a significant chunk last year. We're expecting to come down again for this 22-23 school year. I know this budgetary projection of 3.7. Understand that the savings between the 4 million and the 3 million, and when we have 500 students in our own cyber, that's because of the fact that Mr. Hatch and Haley and everyone involved with doing ACA here, we've created a program that parents can get behind. I call it the battle of the supermarket. We're winning the battle of the supermarket. When moms get together to talk about different things, when they're standing in the checkout line and they're asking about Billy and Bobby and Susie, we're winning that battle because the parents that are signing up for our cyber are signing up for the accountability and the structures that our cyber expects of students. And these are key parents who are really interested in the quality of the education that students receive. And we're seeing that in a massive savings when you look at where our cyber costs were versus where they are this year. I know it's projected to increase next year. Our hope is that that's not going to happen, but you got a budget.
What's leading you to that conclusion that it will go up that significantly? I'm just curious.
just a gut off going with what we actually expended in 21-22. It was 3.6 and a half, and I just budgeted a little conservatively,
That's all right. That's all right.
bumped it up a little.
I'm a
Well-
conservative guy.
We've tried, the problem we have with the budget is when we don't budget conservatively, we get burned. Because there's always something, the budget is so tight. When healthcare fluctuates north, it impacts the entire budget. When gasoline prices went up, that impacts the budget in the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's not like we have just all this padding. We literally, what we've got is so lean and mean, you're going to see those bounces when they occur. So when we suspect something might be going up, we have to take that into consideration.
Well, and the other point in this, in 22-23, I thought this was what I budgeted, and it's actually going to come in more like 3.5. It's what we actually see for this year based on what the monthly bills have been. It's going to be higher than the 3 million was too low. I was too hopeful with that.
Now, how many kids do we have in outside cyber right now, Brad? 260. I think we were about 275 for the majority of the year. So we're not that far above number wise where we were 3-4 years ago. It's just continually trying to get these kids to come back. And the other thing is some of these kids, when they're in outside cyber, when COVID pushed them out or they left because of COVID, a lot of times they're going to try to finish their education there. And so even though we are actively pursuing bringing them back, you're literally you're asking somebody to change a school district. And so it's not as easy as preventing them from going in the first place.
And then
The alarming ones are when we have kindergartners that are registering for outside cyber schools. I know we take a very critical look at those, and we do everything we can do to talk to those parents about the challenges that that's going to create and really the importance of having their students get off to a good foundation school-wise. I know that every time Camilla sends me a new enrollment, we were on the phone with those people that day, offering, hey, are you aware, first of all, of our cyber program? And B, what can we do to help support you? We have this variety of programs. We really can provide something for everyone. What can we do to sway you to utilize our products?
So the next slide shows our capital reserve projections. Now this is capital reserve projections clear out to the 27-28 fiscal year. So it includes paving projects. We have a couple of large paving projects that we're anticipating. Juniata Gap is the one that is most in need. Logan also has some, I'm sorry, not Logan. Oh, yes. Logan, Pleasant Valley, Ebner, Juniata Gap are all in need of paving. So we've put those onto the capital projects 5-year plan. Roofing projects, again, Logan is out of warranty on its roof, and is going to be one that's probably going to happen within the next couple of years. So that is on our 5-year plan. Some structural repairs down at the bus garage. We're having some structure there in the van bays that we need to reinforce and rebuild that facility. As you know, we've already approved some increases to the fieldhouse sound and video systems. The safety and security upgrades, that includes the intrusion system at the high school, as well as the security film throughout the district. The junior high field down here, the turf is in really bad condition, so we've added that to the 5-year plan. We need some new compressors on rooftop units with the refrigeration unit, as well as the hot water heaters at the junior high school. In addition to some other rooftop units throughout the district, we've put those on the plan. The Penn Lincoln chiller is already been board approved, and it's scheduled to happen next year. The window replacements, of course, are coming from ESSER funds at the 2 buildings that are happening with next summer. The pneumatic to digital conversion, that's on our HVAC system. That's something that has been kind of in everybody's sights for the last couple of years. That's the anticipated cost to make those conversions at a number of our buildings. And elementary remodeling, as we know, The Washington Jefferson building needs some upgrades. The Baker building needs some upgrades. And there was one other one, I think it was Juniata, what we have on here that needs some physical upgrades to their facilities. So we put those on here. There's some other capital projects, incidental costs, the pool pump, at the high school pool, those types of things are in that other line item. So between now and that 27-28 timeframe, our wish list, as it may be, things that there is anticipated need for, are going to cost us about $12 million.
And when we had been in facilities meetings, Mr. Hoff, I believe, had suggested that we set aside, and some of you others may have made the same suggestion, set aside a certain amount, prioritize for that year, and I believe it was $2 to $2.5 million a year. And so we can start budgeting those transfers from the general fund to the capital reserve and stay on top of these projects, and then just leverage funds as we can. And we leveraged ESSER funding for the windows, which was like a windfall. So our tentative projected operational deficit remains at $3.5 million. We had talked about this before, and that's based on state funding. And if we go to the index and that includes adding all the security and special ed support, that we believe that outside of ESSER funding, it will be $3.5 million. And we'll keep you updated on that as this year winds down. Just a review of some of our prior year cuts and changes that were implemented. In 1920 and 2021, some of you were on the board. Some of you may have have read in the paper or knew that we were doing it. We changed all of our electrical, our light bulbs to LED. It's in every building. Our own electrician did that, and we estimate that it saved $15,000 in utilities every year. We did propose the 1.5 million savings with reference-based pricing, but that was blocked by UPMC. We did remove GACTC from our healthcare plan since we were self-funded. We were providing a premium rate to them that they were paying, and then their actual costs were coming in hundreds of thousands of dollars more than what they were paying us. So we removed that risk and those expenses from our plan. And that was board approved, and that has saved us money. The board approved offering a retirement incentive, I believe it was 3 years ago, and we are still paying that $5,000 per person per year. But we did realize almost $500,000 of savings with those retirements. At the time, when we closed Kimmel, we did not replace the principal. And then in the last couple of years, as the Kimmel program and some of the other programs started being more active, you may recall that we hired a principal that was 10 months. Well, now that those programs are booming and we have special ed programming at Kimmel, in addition to 500 students in ACA, that's when we've pushed it back to having a full-time principal at Kimmel, but we did recognize some savings over the course of the years as those programs built back up. When we had such a problem before the junior high and before the high school opened, and we were able to move 9th grade up, and 6th grade was still in the elementary, and we had, some of you may recall, terrible overcrowding at Ebner, and we had modulars that were costing us $70,000 a year to take the overflow of students. once the high school opened and we were able to move the sixth grade up to the junior high, we were able to get rid of that modular lease. That saved $70,000. You may recall we switched our delinquent collections over to Portnov. And in that first year, we recognized about $500,000 in additional delinquent revenue. We removed Keith Field from our maintenance when we signed it over to the soccer club to maintain it. And that is saving us approximately $15,000 a year. And one of the biggest, an instructional program that we eliminated because through the retirement incentives, 3 of the family consumer science teachers at the high school were retiring all at the same time. We eliminated, and Brad can speak to it better, we eliminated a child development class that was a CTC class, and made some other elective offerings, but that saved us by closing those family consumer science programs. We saved about $375,000. So realized savings from previous cuts have been over $1.7 million. We had hoped to save 3.2 with the reference-based pricing, but we're doing other creative things to try to keep that healthcare down. The cuts included in this year's budget, I mentioned it earlier. In prior years, Dr. Priatel had asked the buildings to set a reserve aside, and they reserved it, but it still stayed in the budget. This year, we took those reserves out of the budget, and it was $45,000 reduced for the high school, $33,000 for the junior high. Departmental budgets were reduced by $30,000, and our workers' comp premium has come in at a $20,000 reduction, and that's one of the expenditure lines that I adjusted between May and June. We got our premium proposals, so I made those adjustments. So total cuts included in this year's budget are $128,000. And we have a list of some other proposed.
Now, we are not advocating for any of these cuts, but I think the board needs to understand, where we are. I mean, we're in the bottom 10% of cost per student in the entire state. Meanwhile, our population and our special ed population are in the top 10% of the state. I mean, but understand that there are things that the board would like us to maintain, and they have a cost. I mean, we try to keep our grass and we try to keep our buildings as beautiful as possible. Well, understand, if we went to bi-weekly cuttings from weekly cuttings, we'd save $30,000 a year. We did extra mulching this year. That was a $23,000 bill. Yes, the buildings look better. That looks the way we want it to look, but at the same time, it comes at a cost. Using an outside vendor to handle weeding is $11,000. We have our guys weeding, yes, but at the same time, it's huge, the acreage that we have and the labor that's involved. Shrub maintenance, same thing, $60,000. If we chose to close Mansion Park on the weekends and evenings and in the winter, I mean, no one wants to do this because it's part of our value to the community. The board has been very expressive about wanting to maintain these things. Well, that's about $50,000 worth of cost. Reduced tennis court availability would save $6,600. Renegotiating freight for textbooks and literally sending our guys out to pick them up could save anywhere up to $40,000 a year. We can increase the rent on the facilities. They generate upwards of $3,900 to $4,000. The board has been very adamant about keeping our support of the public library. Well, that's $200,000 a year. The board has been very adamant about keeping adult education at the level it is, and we may be even expanding that depending on what happens with the ESL population. but understand that's a $50,000 commitment. Instructional programs, and no one is proposing any of this. But if we were not to send the ninth grade to the GACTC, would approximately save us $500,000 to $600,000 a year. Your art and your music programs is 2.2 million. Behind the wheel driver's ed, 15,000. Sending clubs to competitions, it's 50,000. What the reality is, and some of this, I know this is like, why are you torturing us with this? But the reality is, if we want to maintain our school the way we feel is appropriate, this is where we are. I mean, no one in this room has backed any of these ideas previously, and as a matter of fact, is worked to ensure the quality of what we deliver to kids. You turn the page, like if we went from cruisers to buses to yellow to what I call banana cruisers, the STA yellow buses, it could save us in the neighborhood of $170,000 a year. But then you're sending your teams, your athletic teams, on 2-hour trips or longer without any facilities and in an unair conditioned school bus. Our softball program is approximately $66,000 a year. Our gymnastic program is $18,000 a year. Our volleyball program is $91,000. Our baseball program is $61,000. Our soccer program is $67,000. Our golf program is $19,000. Our tennis program is $33,000. Our swimming program is $21,000. Cheerleading is $23,000. Meal money is $55,000. My point is, unless we actively start looking at, we're gonna cut teachers, we're gonna raise class sizes. Anything that we would look at putting on the table as a cost reduction directly impacts kids. That's how much we've pared the budget down. I mean, we can't do anything about the cost of natural gas. We can't do anything about the cost of gasoline. I mean, think about it. You know, we want to save fuel costs, or we want to save heating costs when we can cut the temperature in classrooms down at 65 degrees. That's not going to last very long. I mean, understand that it's just, you don't want to do that. Or we can just turn the air conditioning on when it goes above 80. Well, that's not going to go over very well either. I mean, we've taken a bare bones budget and we've really cranked the last little bit out of it. And I hope the taxpayers understand that we take it very seriously. And when someone says that, oh, we could just cut. No. There have been some issues this year, and the board has understood this. You know, what we were paying our nurses was not even close to market. What we were paying our security people was not even close to market. What we were providing for our LPNs was not close to market. Our inability to hire psychologists, our inability to fill many positions and to stay competitive. These things are well beyond our control. So I put that little, shall we say, morbid piece into the conversation, just because I want everybody to understand that when we're talking about budget cuts, we're at the bone. And anything we do is going to hurt. And to put it mildly, I've listened to this time and time again. We don't want to hurt kids. Rod, right? We don't want to hurt kids. But it's just, we can only cut so much, or we're going to be hurting kids. And we've done some things. The ACA with the 500 some kids in it, that's a $5 million savings if they're an outside cyber versus us. Because you're talking, what's the ADM now for cyber? Is it 12,000, 13,000 a year? Or is it more like
You
10?
mean what we're paying out to?
Yeah.
It's 10 to 11 for regular and around 20 for special ed.
Right. So you're saying every child who goes outside cyber is $10,000. Let's just use that figure. Well, if those 570 kids that we have in our cyber and outside cyber, that would be $5.7 million. I mean, now there was ESSER money that was supplied. But think about the capital improvements we've made with the ESSER money, because we've had the capacity to deliver 570 students an in-house cyber program, and that represents a huge savings to the district. Think about special ed. I mean, our special ed costs versus our what we get paid by the state. But also look at, when you look at the forecast, or was it the state figures, our annual for special ed students, $9,000, which I believe somewhere in here tells us is amazingly low. Well, that's because we're running a factory to save all that special ed money. I mean, we have almost every single level of special ed intervention outside of a 24/7 residential facility. If we can't handle a child, they're either going to an all-day facility or they're going to a juvenile facility such as George Jr. or Summit Academy. I mean, and kudos to our staff, kudos to our special ed people, kudos to our teachers. We've made some amazing things happen. But if we do anything to upset that apple cart, now the bills are going to start to come in. If we can't provide the services, if we can't do that, we're going to have to start paying the $50,000, $60,000 for an outplacement, which I believe we have. At the beginning of the year, we had 51 students placed outside, and that was down from about 100 or so that we had placed outside previous. So all of these things are significant savings. It's just, and I'll end my sermon with this. We take it very seriously to maintain program and to make sure that we're giving our children the best possible education and at the best possible value to our community and our taxpayers.
Don't you think it's a board member's responsibility to be fiscally conservative, or to watch where the money's at?
Absolutely.
Don't you think that I had a right to ask for cuts? I didn't want cuts that you had with athletics or nothing like it. Just some cuts that we could save some money. That's all I asked. I didn't ask to cut anything else, or I just wanted to go back and get some cuts. That's my responsibility as a board member.
And I understand that. I in no way want to disrespect you, Dave, because the point is, to the people who are out there watching this on YouTube, they have to understand what we've done. We have created as streamlined a program as we possibly can. That's not to say that that we can account for every penny, but that wouldn't be practical. You spend more time chasing the pennies than you would spend more money on people to do that than you would running the school district.
I'm just saying, personally, I asked for a cut, and they came back with a total budget cut of $128,000. That's all I asked, is that they did something. So that's all. I didn't want to get rid of athletics. I didn't want to get rid of the band. I didn't want to get rid of traveling. I don't want to get rid of a bus. But I just asked to get some cuts. That's all.
Yes, Dave, your heart is totally behind the kids in the community and the district. At the same time, I think the public needs to understand where we are in this process. We have done a lot to make sure that we are fiscally conservative, that we are fiscally responsible. And this board has been faced with tough decisions for the past 7 years because of the fact that needs were there. I mean, and I have the utmost respect for everyone in this room, just to understand that if there's one thing that drives my blood pressure up and it will start the day after this budget passes, is the budget. Okay. I mean, I believe that's the first conversation I have when somebody shows up at my door and says, we need, how are we going to pay for it? How is it going to generate savings? Because we have to, our number one responsibility is to educate kids, and it's very difficult. And we have to be responsible. And that's my only point there, was that so that not just the members of the board know, but the tax-paying citizens of Altoona also understand that we take it very seriously.
You know, I as a board member, I'm out with a lot of people. I go out a lot. I have a job that I'm visible in, and they asked, and I tell them that we're going to raise taxes, and I'll be the first to say I'm going to raise taxes, and because what we're going to do with our elementary, putting a guard at every elementary, doing some physical plant work to the elementary, and people understand that and they appreciate us doing that. So most taxpayers understand that we have to have a tax increase just because of that situation, because just prices are going up, and they understand that. So I don't think there's going to be a big outcry for a tax increase. Most understand it.
And I appreciate that. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Can
You know,
I
I have
ask,
to say-
I know I'm getting ahead of things, but 2026 with the debt service, and it looks daunting. I'm looking at one of your tables. The debt service balloons up to $36 million from $7 million.
That's 4 years worth. Rather than list down every year, that's
Okay.
lumped, that's 26 to 2026 to 2030. That's combined. That's,
Okay.
It's an aggregate.
it's just because to present it, we put multiple years together.
Yeah, with the reconstruction of this building and the loss of the sinking fund for the junior high. Those two items were the biggest impact.
But everything that we're budgeting for these, where you see 21, 22, 23, those all already include the debt service for the building, for the new building. It's just from 26 to 30. We're grouping them and just to keep it shorter. And that's a valid question. And that is a scary number if it was for 1 year. This 15-year historical retirement rate increase effect compared to the state subsidy. A few meetings ago, Mr. Francis pointed out that the state doesn't always, yes, we got an increase, but we can't always count on it. We don't really know what they're going to do. And this is a perfect indication of that. If you look, I have them highlighted in yellow. In 2009-10, the retirement rate was 4.7%, and our state subsidy was 38 million. It took us 6 years to get it back to 38 million. They gave us in 10-11, it went up to 39 million because they used ERA funds, the Obama infusion of money. You may recall that. And the state ended up reducing the amount that the state was going to provide down to 36 million. And they supplanted federal money in. So we got an increase, but then they took it back the following year in 11-12. It stayed level in 12-13. Meanwhile, over in the second column under the retirement rate, it's going from 4.78 to 5.64, 8.65, 12%, 16%, 21. By the time we get to 15-16, we're at a retirement rate of 25.84, and our state subsidy is just where it was from 6 years before. It continued. The retirement rate continued to go up incrementally, and our state subsidy was going up somewhat. Then when COVID hit in the blues, there were 4 years that we received flat funding. For 2 years, we received flat funding. In 14-15, we received less than we received the year before. And in 2021, we received less than the year before. So in the third from the right column, the retirement increase covered by AASD fund balance. Over the course of these years, where we have tried to keep the millage rate low, and we went 7 years without a tax increase from 10-11 to 16-17. We maintained it at 55, and we still managed to maintain fund balance, and there were cuts and freezes in that time frame. But it is retirement issue that was created by the state has taken its toll on us. And you can see in that retirement increase covered by the AASD fund balance, 11.39 million is the amount our fund balance has decreased. And it's, in my mind, a direct relation, has a direct relationship to this retirement issue. Hopefully, as you can see in the last couple of years, as the annual state subsidy increase, they did include level up. I did read something that there's a possibility that Governor Shapiro may throw in some more level up again this year, but that's not to be determined. That hasn't been determined, and that's not included in our budget. But again, you can see how fleeting. 1 year we receive an increase, the next year we receive a decrease, then an increase and a decrease and another decrease. So to Mr. Francis' point, we can't really rely on what the state is going to do. And I just thought this was when I saw it laid out like this, and you could see the retirement just jumping up, and the state not doing their share. And this increase in the retirement cost is net of what they were reimbursing us. Yes, they are reimbursing us a portion of the retirement, but the other half is on us. Right. And they didn't help us with the state subsidy for the mess they created. A review of the statewide comparisons. Again, we're in the top 10 to 20% in the state in enrollment. We're in the lowest 10% in the state with our expenditures. And kudos to the board and all the boards who have helped us get to that point. And then just in summary, that's our revenues we included an Act 1 increase. There was an increase in the homestead support last year. They maintained it this year, thank goodness. We are projecting state funding increases, which are welcomed. But in our expenditures, we're increasing security and special ed support. And that's critical. We have capital reserve needs, so we need to think about funding potentially 2.5 million over to capital reserve every year. And then we still have that mandated retirement and cyber tuition. Our statewide comparisons, we're among the lowest per pupil expenditures in the state, but among the highest enrollment. And then our fund balance, we're projecting the operational deficit at 3.5 million, and we are maintaining a fund balance of 25 million. I'll be happy to answer questions or provide more information. I know it's a lot to absorb and digest, but
I'd
we're
like to say
at your service.
this more or less puts everything on the table. And I've been saying this for years. We're losing $3.7 million in cyber charter schools. There's no accountability for cyber charter schools. Someone higher than us should have accountability and should have had something like this with cyber charter schools and show the taxpayers and everyone out there, hey, this is your money. This is how it's spent. This is what they're getting paid. And someone higher than us should say, hey, Altoona has a cyber school, use theirs. And it's not just Altoona, it's other school districts in the state. And it's killing the districts and they're raising taxes because they have to, because they don't want to deprive the kids of sports, after school activities. We have it, use it. $3.7 million. We can do a lot with that money around here. And I say the powers above us. I'm asking you, we're asking you, hey, enough's enough. We're tired of getting beat up. Let's let someone else get beat up. We have a cyber charter program. We have kids out there use it. It's what, $10,000 a kid. That's a shame. That's all I gotta say. Someone should step up to the plate.
Ron, I can't recall if you're there. We did go and meet with our state legislators and bring this up and basically to say what you're saying, like, we can't control this. We need your help at the state level and yeah. No business could sustain itself with the retirement costs that we have. No business could do that, but school districts are asked to do that. It's unfortunate.
I think compounding all this is the fact that our highest budgetary expenditure is on personnel. And the state of hiring personnel is such that those costs are going to be driven higher. I mean, just to keep teachers on staff and to hire new ones. So I think public schools have a lot of need to get more support than just local. We need state and federal. In Altoona, the majority of our revenues come from the state. So when the state doesn't step up and do their job, then it's reliance on the local taxpayer to do more. And I know Dave and many others mingle with old people like me. And you know that fixed income, it's hard to find additional money. So it's a tough job now, and it's going to get tougher as we proceed. But
You know, people were saying,
I think the
uncle, but
board
it's,
gained a lot of information and insight into how our money is spent and how the money revenue or the revenues that come to us. So we really appreciate all the work that you, Sue, Dr. Priatel, Brad, and Haley did to get us this information. And thank you for the great job that you're doing. You're certainly helping us do our job of being good stewards of the taxpayer dollar. So thank you. Okay.
That concludes our presentation tonight.
Any other items we need to bring up? Okay, all the items are covered on the agenda. We are adjourned.